the kind of the friction that people get is like, there's imposter syndrome. How can I navigate the workplace with still being assertive and getting my boss to like me?
Correct.
How can I go through university and, my friends want to do X, Y, Z on a Friday night, but I want to do Y on a Friday night.
Right.
So there's all these things that we don't want to have people that like us, want to be fit in. And it is Maslow'S hierarchy of needs, but we need to know, where do our needs rank in that order then? On that pecking order, what is the most important? And then we have to work kind of backwards from there.
Welcome to the Better Human Podcast. My name is Greg Witz, and each week we're going to be bringing you some incredible and inspiring guests and topics that are going to take your life to the next level. Thanks for spending time with us. Sit back and enjoy the show. Colby, welcome to the show.
Greg, thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
It's amazing to have you. We're going to talk resilience today, and you're an expert on this. So with the world being what it is and being a little bit, call it, how would I describe it? Fragile from the last few years. Resilience is one of the most important things that we can start to really work on, right? So, Colby, I want to start the conversation with you on that topic, which is, you're a resilience expert. You talk on it. How do you define resilience? I mean, let's start there.
So I'd say that's a great question. I'd say resiliency is a set of behaviors, and it's a set of practices that you do to help get you out of a rut and to help you go from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And your book, The Curveball, talks a lot about this, right? The story of grit and determination and perseverance and pushing through. Tell me, how did you, let's go back to that. So you said it's a set of actions and behaviors, and let's start describing some of these words. So, what is the behavior that we might start practicing?
So I think at somewhere there's a Latin underpinning of the word resiliency. So if you look at what that kind of, the building blocks of that word, you can start to see where its root essence comes from. Mm-hmm. So I'd say, really what I would say is, it's a set of practices, but it's really how you think and it's how you feel about approaching a certain challenge, approaching a moment of adversity. I call it in the curveball, a sets of pitches, a sets of how you respond to the moment. That is what's really going to help you in overcoming adversity and going through that whole motion.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I'm listening to the words adversity and we're talking grit and resilience, and we're living in 2022. And yes, it's been a little bit, messed up over the last couple of years. But, if you think about like older generations, even our grandparents, I mean, they were tough, right?
Yeah.
They were tough. Do you think it's part of do we see a resilience problem in the world today, specifically maybe with some of the younger generations?
I think we do. I think we do see a resilience problem, but what we more often see is a why does this matter to me problem. Why is this important to me? Why am I, showing up and conquering and learning to be more resilient in times of deep change? Is it I'm having a trouble at school? What is forcing me to get up and grow and pushing me through that process? So we're seeing two things. We're seeing why is a big problem. We're seeing how can, for lack of a better word, legacy institutions cope with challenges and to helping kids thrive in the world today.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with it. It is a why problem in some regards. So, with that being said, so resilience is, would you agree, is an outcome? So, you're not going to develop that resilience without actually going through, in quotations, the curveball, the adversity, the challenge, the stress. And you mentioned change, and change is one of the things that really rocks us, right?
Totally. It is an outcome for sure. But preceding that, we have to take certain, sets of best practices, do certain behaviors, think and reframe things in a different way. Mm-hmm. If you look at taking a challenge and breaking it down sequentially, like I advocate in the curveball, one of the things is to embrace, imperfection and know that, I don't have to be perfect all the time. There's a saying from the Japanese called kintsugi, which is all about embracing imperfection. And the story is there was a broken pot, and they mixed the pot with some kind of lacquer and such that it wasn't imperfect, it wasn't perfect when it was put back together, but that process of it
Mm-hmm.
really was just like it made it look better than it was coming out of it, and that end outcome.
Mm-hmm. You,
So it's a great way to reframe how we can take broken and kind of imperfect actions and imperfect. Maybe I might not be resilient right now, but I can learn to become more resilient and more agile and adaptable to fit in the moment of adversity.
mm-hmm. Reframing is a very important tool. And you're saying, like, we got to go through the process and there's certain practices. So I think that's one of the main ones that we can actually start to operate with, which is, can I reframe, which is starting with my mindset and the way I look at things, right? I think the other thing that's really important, I don't know if you agree with this, is my willingness to be fluid, adaptable. There's also the analogy, I think it could be Japanese, but I think it's a Chinese analogy, which is like the way water flows, right? Water doesn't stop. It goes over and around, and water will keep moving, right? In the way it does. It will be fluid and adaptable.
100%. No matter how many rocks come in the way, 100%. It's always 100%. I
Right,
agree with that.
right.
There's never been a more urgency to be fluid.
Right. Considering the fact that every time we try to make plans right now and have some sort of predictability and certainty, which is real sort of core human needs that we have, right? The world is not there, right? So did you grow up resilient? I mean, when did,
I mean,
there's a question. How did
kind of the backstory behind the book and why I'm so passionate about resiliency
Mhm,
and times of unexpected change was when I was a teenager, I had a learning disability, and it really forced me to become resilient.
mhm,
Forced me, and I didn't know at that time what that word meant, but it forced me to change what I was doing in a different way. It
mhm,
forced me to look at myself and see my own potential versus having others tell me what I should think and how I should be.
mhm.
So
Yeah,
that was kind of the profound moment that just changed everything.
right. I also had a learning disability when I was a kid. I
Yeah.
failed academically, actually. For me, it was I was sharing the story the other day. If I had a good relationship with the teacher, right, and we can call the teacher a mentor or a coach, which I think is also a really important part of the process of resilience, is having those people around you to guide you and mentor you, and in some cases believe in you, right? But if I
Yeah.
had that relationship, I excelled in the subject.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, but my ability to process and learn traditionally was I had a very difficult time doing so. Right?
Mm.
And in a lot of cases, I think to my own resilience, yes, I had to figure out how to work through that
Yeah.
and get there. You talk about perfectionism, and we live in the world of social and just content everywhere and filters galore,
Yeah.
right? It's almost like the world and the environment isn't set up to help you be resilient, because the drive and social is to be perfect. It is to have this perfect image and this perfect thing. Some of my favorite videos are the behind the scene videos, like the bloopers and like the f ups and stuff like that.
For sure. For sure. That's why I believe, like, when you don't have it outside, resiliency really begins on the inside.
Hmm.
Really begins on the inside. How can I show up and adapt myself to this? I
Hmm.
might not be getting the credit like at school or at home or in my social group, but how can I feel about myself just one day at a time and go forward from there? Because
Hmm.
that's going to be the starting block.
Right. How difficult was with a learning disability? How difficult was it for you to write the book?
So I wrote so I wrote the book summer 2016. Finished my first year of law school, but it was difficult because they were made up from events in the past, so quite a number of years in the past.
Okay.
So it was very interesting for me to remember that. What was that like? What did that feel like?
Right. Going back. Now, I mean, did you plan on writing a book, or this was just
Yeah, I knew at some level like I always wanted to write. So
Mhm,
I remember in high school, it was for an English class, and I wrote this little book on Charles Dickens.
mhm,
And my dad and I, we got it like laminated, and I've always known that I'd love to write a book somehow, some way. And at home, I was around books and great
mhm,
conversations around books, but it was always very natural. nothing ever felt forced. And I to preempt the next question, this was not a pro forma career path. There was no do this, do that, do that, do that, do that, and then successful outcome. It was always very natural for me to want to do, to have that inspiration, to have that guidance.
How much did you loop your dad into this process?
Oh, extensively.
Yeah.
Yeah, extensively. I mean, from the forward, beautiful forward, but kind of it was just organic, just the guidance, like, what do you think about this? How should this be done? And guidance on copying or numerous, but yeah, it was always done just very, whenever I needed something, I would go to.
Let's for the audience, your dad's Robin Sharma, right? I was going to make a joke. So how did you feel when he sold the Ferrari?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And an incredible thought leader, been in the personal development space for a long time, author, right? So, that's where I'm asking the question, which is, well, here's another question. How much pressure did you have to write a really good fucking book, considering the fact that you're coming from a lineage of an amazing author?
So that's an interesting question. So I had talked with someone about this just yesterday. Mm-hmm. Zero is the answer, because I felt zero pressure. It's going to have this sales figures, or it's going to do that, or it's going to do that. Zero, because that's not the way to do it. That is not the way to do it. So Colby, it was all just going through it one base at a time, one book at a time, one resonation with the message at a time.
Cool. Super cool.
Yeah.
I grew up in, my father started my business. He passed away in 2012. Very intense man, but very, very impactful. He did some amazing work. And that's who got me into this space. And for many years, I found myself always fighting to, we could say, get out of his shadow, but eventually be able to define my own identity as my own message. Did you find that you went through something similar?
Honestly, no. No. And I think what's very interesting is, like, sometimes you have people say, to use your word, the lineage, but they get validation at home, or they don't get it from the outside world, or sometimes it's the converse stuff. But I always got validation at home. I always got, there's never a shadow per se. Maybe when the book came out, there was that kind of imposter syndrome, but in a very good way that actually pushes me to grow and actually pushes me. But knowing that I have, like, for someone like my dad, for guidance and for support, it's just been the world to me.
Who are some of your other mentors? I mean, besides dad and, all of our parents, but, who else, who has helped you along the way, and how?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is invisible influence is a term I like to use, because this person, I haven't seen her in many, many, many years, but she's been a profound influence. Her name is Janice Jordan, and she's an occupational therapist at a school I went to. And what she did for me just changed where I'm at right now, changed what I've been able to do, because it showed me how to think differently and learn differently. And it's okay to think and learn differently, and don't have to be like anyone else.
Yeah, I love that. It's okay to think and learn differently, and it's true. While traditional college school doesn't adopt that. I sent my kids in their early formative years to Montessori for that exact reason, which is, what does Montessori really focus on in those early years? Independence, thinking, decision making, independent learning, growing at their own pace, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, I wish I had that type of experience in my early years. I think it would have changed my academic trajectory, right?
I think the problem now is more in post-secondary. You're seeing in post-secondary, how does post-secondary deal with mental health, and how do they deal with adversity? And because there's so much happening on campus, and you have careers, and you might not feel you're good enough, and you're homesick, and you're going through all these emotions, externally, internally.
Yeah. And the world over the last year has not supported inclusivity and acceptance. It's created a lot of divide and segregation. I've been saying this for a while. The most dangerous thing that's happened over the last couple of years is we've removed debate. We've removed dialogue. right? We've removed the ability to say, I disagree with you and I think you're wrong, and vice versa, and say, okay, that's cool, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like an all or nothing. And I find myself in the world today almost shying away from topics. In fact, I was at some friends over the weekend, and some political topics came up. And of course, I'm like, I'm in. I'm like, all right, let's talk, right? And my wife was looking at me and she was like, babe, you can't. Like, you need to, because it's almost become offensive, right? So, and maybe this is a tee up for resilience. If we were more resilient, would we be able to debate more and dialogue more? I think yes, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think so for sure, because we would have a hardened skin. We have more hardened skin to absorb that.
Do you do any speaking at like universities and post-secondary?
I'd love to do more. I'd really love to do more. It's kind of, it's something I'm very, very passionate about, but I haven't been offered or haven't been, yeah. But to answer your question, yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great topic and conversation, for MBAs, for your universities, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I should introduce you to, his name is Ed Heiner. Do you know who he is? He wrote a book called Guts, Greatness Under Tremendous Stress. Talks a lot about grit, right? And takes a lot of he's a retired Navy SEAL.
Oh, wow.
A lot of those lessons from there. Anyway, talks a lot on topics like this. And I think you guys could have some great sort of overlap and maybe a potential collab. So I'll get you guys in touch as well.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So, back to the process of building resilience. We said reframing, right, which helps with mindset. We talked about being fluid and adaptable. So, like water, let's roll, right? Let's flow. We broached the topic of mentorship and making sure that you've got those people. You mentioned this teacher, which, you remembered her name. How old were you at the time?
12, 13.
12, 13, yeah. I had one teacher. Her name was Mrs. Berger. It's really the only teacher I really remember in a positive way, right?
What stood out to you about her?
How kind, and what I would describe today as how much psychological safety and trust and acceptance. It was a very safe place. And as mentioned, I grew up in home. Dad was great in a lot of ways, but it was also very intense at times as well, right? So
yeah.
The way I describe him is he was a very brilliant man, and in his brilliance brought some eccentric behavior, both positive and negative, right?
Sure.
So that's the impact that I think she made on me. And I've actually never really thought about this until right now. It's probably one of the reasons that I operate with one of my values, which is generosity and kindness to be of service.
For sure. I'd say the other key missing element is resiliency is, what do we do to cope with that? Mm-hmm. How good are our rituals? How good are routines, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And going back to, the book, there's a great line, when the going gets tough, the tough return to rituals. Mm-hmm. And it's, a ritual is just something you can do that has a high performance, trigger for your behavior to get you to the next level.
Mm-hmm. You're a sports guy, you love sports. You wrote a book, right, with a lot of analogies and stories from sport. I know you talk about the line from Any Given Sunday with what's his name? Pacino, where he's like, it's a game of inches, right? And that's life, right? It's a game of inches. With the with sports, I mean, how were you involved in a lot of sports? Is that
I played soccer, high school. Played baseball, kind of also high school. So baseball, soccer, basketball. Oh yeah.
How important do you think sports are for, call it all, social development?
I think they're incredibly important. You look at what's happened 2 years, pandemic, the lack of kids in sports. That's why Right to Play is doing such a great job, great organizations like that. Mm-hmm. They're the glue that holds society together. They're about building bridges and not barriers. And we can use so much more like that right now. What we need is we can have a level playing field for sports for all ages. And
Yeah, very cool. I was going to say, back to high performing athletes. One of the things that they'll do is they'll practice a lot of what we talk about. Their mindset reframing. A lot of them will have a mantra, right? Which they'll say right before they go on or in the game, like, whatever their experience is. I had an ex-team member who came from a pro athlete background.
Yeah.
She would tell a story that there was a skier, a mogul skier, and right before they would go down, he would say to himself, soft knees, soft knees, soft knees, soft knees, soft knees, soft knees. And what that meant was, as you were taking the moguls, the bumps to life, right? Another analogy, take them softly, right? Like, like don't resist. And it's a natural, I think that's part of the challenge with resilience, is when we're going through change and all this adversity, there's a natural resistance. I want to pull away from it, right? I want to avoid it, right? And this is what I try to tell people, which is, you got to lean into this shit. In fact, there's some scientific ways in quotations, by the way, and for the podcast audience, and, or there was some thought that was put into, or research might be a better description, which is, how do you improve your self-esteem, right? How do you develop your confidence, right? And what is confidence, right? So there's five things, which goes self-awareness, being aware of self, right? That also maybe floats into a little bit of what we talked about before, knowing where we need to learn and where we need to grow, right? Emotional intelligence.
Yeah, big one.
Huge, big one. Right? And emotional intelligence is self-awareness and self-management and relationship management. And if we could do those three very well, right? Assertiveness, the ability to set limits. And I say this to people about assertiveness. Assertiveness is very simply asking for what you want. It's not moving into this overbearing, I'm going to pound on you and speak loudly. It's, this is my objective and this is my request, right? It's the expression.
I'd say the kind of the friction that people get is like, there is imposter syndrome. How can I navigate the workplace with still being assertive and getting my boss to like me? Correct. How can I go through university and, my friends want to do X, Y, Z on a Friday night, but I want to do Y on a Friday night. Right. So there's all these things that we don't want to have people to like us, want to be fit in. And it is Maslow'S hierarchy of needs, but we need to know, where do our needs rank in that order though? On that pecking order, what is the most important? And then we have to work kind of backwards from there. One of the things that I share in the book and in talks, et cetera, is, when you're faced with adversity and you get that feeling and you want to escape the classic fight or flight syndrome or feeling, what is the origin theory of that response? And that goes to Dr. Leslie Becker Phelps, PhD, in an article that she wrote. What is the origin theory of the response? Because that came from somewhere. We had to, learn that in some way. We just picked it up, and we said, this makes us feel good. There's a phenomenon. It's called the king baby and queen baby phenomenon, and it's that time in the womb where it's like the world is just going to make sense for us. We don't have to, proactively go after what we want to go after. We want to still stay in the womb, still stay stuck, because that's the ego. And it goes to Freud. That's the heroic self being defeated by the egoic self. Mm-hmm. But we have to know that we have to tap into the trauma. We have to tap into those deeper emotions, and all together, that's how we can slowly start to come out of and be resilient.
Correct. We in my world, we call it emotional memories, right? And I do a lot of work. The training is based a lot on concepts from the domain of psychology, and there's a massive piece of being able to talk about this stuff, right? It's known as the talk and cure in more of a sort of intense, sort of traumatic experience, but being able to talk through it, because as you talk through it, and you can do it in an environment where you're not being judged and problem solved and fixed and advised and guided, but just you're able to get it out without being interrupted. You're able to wrap your head around things a lot easier, and you start to build more rational thinking around those events, right? Which allows you to progress forward.
I think like to just jump on that point and elaborate on that. I'd say in the workplaces where they're, and I do a lot of work with, workplaces and companies and organizations, but for the younger folks, the younger interns, the junior lawyers, the junior bankers, accountants, etc., there should have like safe spaces for them. Not safe space in the way that it's become kind of today, but safe spaces in the sense that like, we want to help build the bridge with you.
Right.
We want to be partners on building the bridge with you. Come and let's talk. Let's have a dedicated hour to talk together. There's no fear of reprisal. There shouldn't be, but there's no fear of an outside influence. There's no fear of, this might get leaked around the water cooler, et cetera, et cetera. And I just think that'd be a very interesting thing to have, because you don't really see that unless someone says, a workplace, leave or benefits to go to see someone or like a therapist, et cetera. On a daily work week, that'd be cool.
Yeah, it would be, as you were talking about like that safe space in an office, where the image that came over me was like, a room that everyone goes to and they get hugged. They get a cuddle buddy, right? It's like, come and tell me more, right? Share your feelings. But you're absolutely right. Just coming back to what you were saying before, which is fear of reprisal, and like, you were talking about imposter syndrome. I think it's even more defined as we have an innate primitive need to be part of a community. Sense of belonging, sense of acceptance. One of my primitive needs as a human being is significance, to be treated with importance, right?
Yeah.
And those two things are challenged, right? Where it's like, oh, well, maybe I want to go somewhere else, or maybe I want to sort of bring something up, or maybe I don't want to sort of follow along from the place of assertiveness, right? Which is so important, because my perception of that is that there's a consequence that might be jeopardized, so therefore I don't move. And if we're not careful, if we're not building resilience, we end up with what is known as dependency, right? You have dependent relationships, you have dependent employees. And the worst thing about that is, at that point, no one's thinking, everyone's just waiting to be guided and told, and maybe that cuddle buddy again.
Exactly. Then you get to like, codependency. You can get into all these kinds of things.
Correct. So I want to come back to some of your daily practices, right? So we've all got our own sort of things. What are some of the things that you keep in the back of your pocket? These are some of my gems that I practice. I do. Right?
I love drinking coffee like early in the morning. I'm in a great area in London. It's very leafy. It's very green. And I'll be going to like a park or going on a run. I love playing soccer. Love like a weekly soccer game. Back home would be basketball. Trying to implement yoga on a weekly basis.
It's a lot of physical,
back home. I call friends twice a day here back home.
Right. Relationships, really leaning into those, practicing a lot of sort of physical movement and stuff like that. Awesome. And, considering the fact you're living in England, the joke about that, I mean, the weather really sucks and it's gray and like it could be quite depressing at times, right? So, working on those things become really important. I think what I've also heard you say, if I was just to paraphrase, like resilience isn't this thing that you wake up with one day.
Yes.
Up and you're like, I am resilient. Hear me roar. Yes. I will now go write book, conquer a world, run company.
Yeah.
Resilience is, I said this in a post years ago, it's getting the shit kicked out of you for year after year after year after year and still getting up and going. And, game of inches. Let's just keep moving an inch at a time. Let's just keep sort of chugging on forward.
I'll share a great little example. So I worked I was at a law firm I was working at in Toronto. And it was like a corporate solicitor law firm, corporate work. And one day I remember I brought a client into the firm and the boss didn't like it. And she's like, go back to your normal job. You're the articling student, the trainee, go back to that job. You don't do this stuff again. And I was like, wow. Okay, maybe this is telling me something about the environment I want to be in and how I want to see myself going forward and what work I truly want to do.
Hey, so sorry to interrupt, and thank you for listening. I hope you're enjoying the show. If you like today's episode and you want to learn more about some of our programs like the Better Leader program that can change your life, go ahead and click the link below. That was the bad advice that sets you on a much better direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, if someone came into my company and with a sale, I'd be like, "Congratulations, you're now in sales." Right?
Yeah,
Like that's
exactly.
rock. Like the fact that you took that initiative and that's exciting. That's entrepreneurial, right? But lawyers and law firms are not entrepreneurial. It's
Yeah,
different
exactly.
culture, right?
And I think the other thing, just 'cause we're on this theme of like, workplaces and work, and then now the big thing is workplace well-being since the pandemic's receded and we have to adapt to this new world. Um, so I worked at this company a number of years ago, and they were saying, I want to go to this province to do this deal to sell the knives that we're doing. So I sold Cutco knives. And they were kind of saying, are you sure? Because that might be a big sale for you. You know, I don't think you're at that stage right now to do it. I said, trust me, I'll get it done. And I did. And I think the thing there is like people don't know your potential unless you give them a reason to know your potential and what I can truly do. I crushed the sale, needless to say.
Amazing. Amazing. I love what you just said there, which is people don't know what your potential is until you show them what it is, right? Yeah, I think this is also something here, which is we're so busy talking and saying what we're going to do, right? But it's about the action and it's about the doing. And I think that's another important process when it comes down to building resilience, which is action, right? Action creates the path. Action will show you keep going this way or change.
Yeah.
So really, really, really important. So what are you focusing on over the next few months? Where are you going to be putting your time?
So I've finished the draft of my second book called The Underdog. There's a very obvious through line between the curveball and the underdog, but this is a very different story. It's about helping people shed fear, destroy doubt, to access their greatest powers, and it reads like a crime thriller. So
cool.
You're gonna like it.
Can you give us a little bit of some preview, some nuggets? So like, how do we conquer fear, and what
so the main character is being blackmailed, and he has to fight against the odds to save his personal and professional life. And how he does that is the doubts he faces and the inner demons that he's dealing with.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh. And is this a fiction book or is this
it
like
is a fiction book?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Amazing. It's an incredible talent to write and obviously the way you're writing it as well. Very cool. So all goes well over the next few months. That book, hopefully releases when?
Maybe for the winter 2022.
Well, hopefully it does, and if so, we'll do part 2 on the show. We'll have you come back and actually give us some of those things once it's published.
We'd love to. I'd love to send you, and if there's any way can, like an advanced copy or if the manuscript or anything like that.
I would love it. I would absolutely love it. If you'd be willing to do that, I would totally read it, and I would love it. And we could definitely set up a next episode to chat more about that.
Really?
Okay, awesome. So I'll get in touch with you after the show, and we'll make sure that we're connected. Although we're connected.
For sure.
Okay, Colby. By the way, you're the only child?
No, I have a younger sister.
Younger sister?
She's younger.
And what does she do?
She's big into her tennis. She's still at university.
Okay.
Yeah, those two things up.
Okay, cool. Huh? Really prodigy children, huh?
No, it's all just about one day at a time. Just taking it.
Cool.
Being so grateful.
Very cool. Well, you know what? I get that energy from you, man. Like you're generous and you're grateful and you're excited and resilient, of course. All right. Colby, at the end of each show, we ask the Better Human question, which this is called the Better Human podcast. And we're living in a world which sometimes, as we were just describing, the environments, people, situations don't always allow us to be our best selves.
Yeah.
And our belief here is making humans better humans. And as long as we're doing it better tomorrow, then it's okay for us to fuck up today, right?
Yes. Yeah.
If we fuck up again tomorrow, then it's you.
Yeah.
So in your own words, in your own description, what do you think we can all do to be better humans?
how can I find tolerance and empathy in the situation, in the environment, with a teammate, with a colleague that I didn't do yesterday?
Right. And that, as we said, treats people with significance, which is
Absolutely.
very important.
Absolutely.
Colby, if people wanted to learn more about you, if they wanted to get the book, drop some of the links and info where people can find all of this stuff.
100%. You can find the curveball on Amazon worldwide, an ebook, paperback, and audiobook forms. You can connect with me on my social media. My Instagram is Colby Sharma Official. My LinkedIn is my full name, Colby Sharma. My website for my newsletter and where you can get added information is www.colbysharma.com. I'm available for keynote speeches for companies and organizations on thriving and dealing with resiliency in times of deep change, something that a lot of people can use right now. And yeah, I'd love to connect with you. Just love to stay in touch. You can find me on Facebook as well at Colby Sharma.
Awesome. Awesome. We'll make sure all those handles are in the footnotes and the overview of the show. Colby, you are the man. Thank you so much for taking the
Thank you.
time. What time is it in England right now, by the way?
It's about, I think, 5:40, 4:40.
Not so bad. Not so bad. So it's about that time for end of the day sort of drink and maybe some social.
Well, I'm still trying to get some water in me. So
Well, hydrate first.
yeah,
Hydrate
this
first.
water, this heat wave is just taking the
It's
day
hot.
that to everyone.
Well, I told you I live in Costa Rica, so
Oh, okay,
you
yeah,
you want to know what hot is? Like,
yeah, yeah.
there's dry season and rainy season, and one's hotter than the next, but both of them are really hot. But I love the heat, man.
Oh, me too.
It's like the natural sauna, you know?
Me too. I went to school in the Caymans.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Must have been beautiful.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Why'd you leave?
Beautiful place. Yeah, beautiful place, beautiful people, beautiful just the life and simple.
Yeah, expensive to live, but
Yeah,
beautiful to visit, right?
totally.
Amazing.
Totally.
Okay, so we're going to get all your information in the show. Colby, once again, thank you so much for taking the time. If to the audience, if you like today's episode, don't forget to like it, don't forget to subscribe to it, or don't forget to share it, and we will see you next time.
Greg, thanks so much. Great to be with you guys. Take care.
Hey, thanks for listening today. And if you enjoyed today's episode, you're going to love the next one.